Back in the previous section, we used a slice to extract all the delimiters from a list of numbers. I'm going to start by reviewing that code, and I've called this file strings2.py, and I've grabbed that code from that previous section. You can see it on the screen there. What I have done though is deleted the first few lines of code from the file. We used a slice that started at position 1, which is the first comma, then extracted every fourth character until it reached the end of the string. That worked, but it does rely on there being 3 digits in each of the numbers after the first one. That's probably fine if the data came from another computer program, but it's not something we can rely on if a user's typing in those numbers. In that case, we should examine each character in the number string to check if it's a digit or not. As you saw in the previous video, a for loop can be used to do that. What we're going to do here is iterate over numbers and append anything that isn't a digit to the separator string. Once we've seen the code working, we'll step through it with a debugger so you can see what it's doing. The first step is to initialize our separators variable. That's something that causes a lot of confusion. I'm going to spend a minute discussing it once we've seen the code working. So I'm going to change this to become equal to an empty string. And I'm going to come down here and add some code, specifically starting on line 4, for char in number, colon, if not char dot is numeric, and the parentheses are added automatically, colon, separators equals separators plus char. Then we're going to leave the code on line 8 that prints the separators, and the rest of the file is going to remain as it was. Alright, so I've used another one of the string methods here on line 5. I provided a link to the string methods earlier in this section, and we'll be looking at a few of them in our examples. IsNumeric will return true if the character is a number and false otherwise. We want to add things that aren't a digit, which is why the condition becomes if not char.isNumeric. Alright, so I'm going to run the program to make sure that it works. So the first thing we get printed out is a string containing all the separators. Now that was printed by the code on line 8. I'm just going to move this down so we can see a bit more code. The string's created by our for loop on lines 4 through 6. Now we use that string of separators on line 10 to get the individual numbers. Once again, don't worry about the lines 10 and 11 at the moment. You'll learn all about them later. At the moment, we're just using them to show why we want to extract all the separators from number. Alright, so our program works, but how? What we'll do is we'll set a breakpoint on the for loop, line 4 over here. And let's run the program in the debugger. In the variables pane, we can see the value of number. So it's a string containing 7 numbers separated by various separator characters. Below that, we can see that the variable separators is currently bound to an empty string. 2 quotes with nothing between them is an empty string. As I said, I'll come back to that later. Now when I step over the code, which I'll do now, we can see that the variable char gets the first character from the string. That's the digit 9. We're about to test if it's a digit, so I'm going to step over line 5 to do that. The character 9 does represent a number, so isNumeric return true. We're checking for not isNumeric, which is false, so therefore the code on line 6 is skipped. Alright, so we're back now on line 4. I'm going to step over again. Char now gets the next character from number, which is a comma, as you can see. A comma obviously doesn't represent a number, and isNumeric should return false. Not false is true, and we should get line 6 executed this time. Let's step over to check that. And that's good, line 6 is about to be executed. When you're using the debugger like this, always spend time working out what's going to happen before it does. That'll really help you to learn how to read code without ultimately having to run it in the debugger. Okay, separators is currently an empty string. Line 6 will append the value of char to it, which should result in separators becoming a string containing a comma. Let's step over and see. In the variables pane, separators is a comma. So we've seen how char is getting each of the characters in turn, and we really don't need to keep watching line 4. We've also seen that line 6 is only executed when we get a character that's not numeric. So it's line 6 that we're really interested in here. We can debug more efficiently by clearing the breakpoint on line 4 and setting one on line 6 instead. Like so. When we've done that, we can use the button that looks like a typical video play icon, a vertical bar and a triangle. And it's this button over here, Resume Program. And what that will do is run our code at full speed until it hits our breakpoint. So I'm going to click that button now. And the debugger executes the code for the 2, 2 and 3 in number, and char now contains a semicolon. That's obviously not numeric, and that's why we've got our breakpoint hit on line 6. When I execute that line, which I'll come over here and step over, we can see that the semicolon is appended to separators. In the variables pane, separators now has 2 characters, a comma and a semicolon. Now it can be easy to see the values in the editor pane. This IDE shows them in grey. As you can see up there, at the end of line 2, we've got the comma and the semicolon. We've also got the current value of char at the end of line 4. Alright, so I'm going to resume the program again by clicking on the icon. And that ran past the 3, 7 and 2. Char, as you can see, is now a colon, and line 6 will cause that to be appended to our separator string when I step over, which I'll do now. You can see the colon has been added to separators now. Next we should get a comma, the one before 775, so let's resume. And I actually forgot about the space there. You can see that obviously we had a space in the string, which is non-numeric, so we've hit that. So therefore a space should be added to our string if I step over, which I'll do now. And you can see the space rather has been added to our separators variable. If I come over now and click on resume, next we should get a comma, and that's the one that's just before the 775. Resume program. Got a comma in char now. If I step over, you can see that's added to our separators variable, and resume one more time. This time, as the last one that will match, we should get the semicolon, which is before the 807, and then there's obviously no other characters. So I'll click on resume. We've got the semicolon, and step over once more, and that's been added to our separators variable. The remaining 3 characters at this point are all numeric, and that means that we shouldn't get to line 6 again, and resuming the program, which I'll do now, should cause it to run through to the end. And you can see that's been the case there. Now if you want to use step over until the program terminates instead of resume program that I used there to be sure about what's happening and go ahead, it's really helpful to see each line being executed when you're learning. So you can see there I pressed resume program, the program ended, we click over to the console now, we can see the output on screen. We've got our separators printed out, followed by a list containing the 7 values in number. So I'm going to stop the video here, but you might want to step through the code a few more times just to make sure you understand what it's doing. And as a reminder, don't worry about lines 10 and 11. They're quite advanced and won't make much sense at this point in the course. In the next video, we'll see how our code can handle values that a user types in. See you in the next video.